Hello, everyone. Tonight we are stepping into the deep breath of a primeval night, where fog clings to a fern-covered plain, and something impossibly massive shifts its weight just slightly. You can hear the gentle creak of bones and sinew as the creature, 5 elephants tall and longer than a subway train, remains eerily upright in the darkness. It doesn't lie down. It never does. And if it ever tried, well, you probably wouldn't survive being anywhere near that collapse. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You stand in the cooling dusk of the Jurassic, somewhere along what will one day be Patagonia. The wind is dry and warm, whistling through stands of horsetail plants. Overhead pterosaurs wheel silently in the plum-colored sky, silhouetted like ancient prayers scribbled in flight. You squint through the half-light, and that's when you see it. It doesn't move like the others. It doesn't pause, doesn't lower itself into the soft grasses as the others begin their ritual of rest. While the herd begins folding down like slow organic cranes, this one remains upright, stoic, silent, a living tower crowned with a tiny head and a neck as long as your childhood regrets. It's a sauropod, sure, but not just any sauropod. This one, you sense it is different. Over time, as you watch, it never reclines. It shifts, occasionally leans its weight from one leg to the next, exhales a breath that smells like warm moss and ancient bark. But it never settles, never rests horizontally. Scientists once imagined all dinosaurs laying down like oversized lizards, curling up under cycads and snoozing like prehistoric cats. But then bones started telling a different story. The vertebrae in some of these sauropods looked like architectural beams, their legs locked like the girders of a bridge. If these giants had tried to lie down, they'd risk compressing their lungs under their own weight or being unable to rise again, like a double-decker bus trying to do yoga. And if that sounds like an exaggeration, keep in mind, some of these beasts weighed over 70 tons. That's the same as 9 T-Rexes, stacked like a living totem pole of terrible decisions. So instead of snoozing in the dirt, it's believed that some sauropods may have remained upright, dozing in brief stretches, even achieving REM sleep while swaying gently the way horses and elephants do today, but scaled up to cathedral size. There's something oddly beautiful about that idea, isn't there? A creature that sleeps like a skyscraper. No bedding, no nests. Just standing on 4 tree trunk legs, its vast mass managed by a network of tendons and ligaments. So taut and tuned, the whole system hums quietly like tensioned steel. You walk closer. Its eye, the size of a grapefruit, blinks slowly without much interest in you. If it wanted, it could flatten you with a flick of its tail. But it doesn't. Instead, it emits a low rumble, not quite a snore, not quite a growl, a sound like someone dragging furniture across the floor of history. You wonder what it dreams of, if it dreams at all. Could something with a brain so small, smaller than a football, conjure visions of the world beyond this marsh? Paleontologists still debate whether such creatures entered true REM states. Some argue yes, citing the bird connection and the presence of brain structures that might support it. Others point out the sheer impracticality of achieving deep sleep while balancing that much body on those narrow feet. And just so you know, some birds can sleep while flying. Not a joke. Frigate birds, for example, will nap mid-flight over the ocean, switching brain hemispheres like a pilot toggling autopilot. Nature doesn't care about comfort, it cares about survival. So maybe this giant isn't denying itself sleep. Maybe it's hacked it. The standing snooze, micro rests, brain pulses. Enough to recharge, not enough to risk falling. The creature inhales deeply, and for a second you're caught in the downdraft of a breath that's been steeped in leaf and sunlight. Its skin is rough like bark mottled with old scars and heat spots from the day's sun. Moss clings to one foreleg. A tiny prehistoric insect somewhere between a cricket and your worst nightmare hops off before it's crushed beneath the shifting foot. And then you hear it again, that soft whine in the distance. Another storm. Because, of course, this place has two settings: dry and biblical flood. You brace yourself against a stump, watching as the animal, still vertical, tilts its massive head skyward. No panic, just patience. Rain begins to fall, each drop tapping against its hide like applause from an invisible crowd. But it doesn't move. It's already in the only position it ever knows. For a brief moment, lightning forks through the clouds and the beast is outlined like some forgotten god in a temple of thunder. It blinks slowly, then returns to its twilight meditation. The others in the herd shift, lay down where they can. But not this one. Not the one that never lies down. And as the wind picks up and the stars blink into existence above you, finally understand what it means to rest, not with comfort, but with certainty. This dinosaur doesn't sleep like you do. It doesn't sprawl in safety or chase dreams across feathered pillows. It stands. It sways. It endures. Just like the age it came from. You wake up, or maybe you never slept, to the sound of a massive exhale, like someone slowly deflating in air. It's the size of a football field. The dawn isn't here yet, but the sky has turned a softer kind of dark, the kind that implies the sun might remember to show up soon. You're still staring at the same towering creature, still upright, still impossibly calm. You move closer to the forelimbs. Not too close unless you enjoy being pancaked into prehistoric jam, but close enough to see the way its legs anchor into the ground. These aren't legs the way a horse or a lion has legs. No. These are pillars. Support beams. Each one the thickness of a redwood trunk and structured like the base of a suspension bridge. You put your hand near one, not on it, because you like having bones inside your body and feel the low hum of tension. Tendons as thick as fire hoses ripple under the skin. The musculature is massive, sure, but it's the bones that really get your attention. Because these aren't built for lying down. They're built for holding up impossible weight for impossible amounts of time. Inside that leg, the femur isn't curved like in humans. It's straight like a skyscraper's column. This design means load is transferred directly through the limb with maximum efficiency. In architecture, it's called post and lintel. In sauropods, it's called survival. Some paleontologists even argue that these bones locked into place while resting like a folding stool locking into position. Once engaged, the muscles could partially relax while tendons and ligaments bore much of the burden. It's like a natural exoskeleton hidden under 60 tons of prehistoric meat. And yes, I said 60 tons. This particular dino, let's call it Argentinosaurus for now, even though we're not playing favorites, might have weighed more than a space shuttle. If it had ever tried to lie down, the logistics of getting back up would be, well, hilarious and tragic, like watching a cement truck try to do yoga on a frozen lake. Historians still debate whether sauropods could kneel at all, you remember reading. There's still no definitive answer. Their knee joints, if you can even call them that, were so specialized for bearing weight that bending them would require a small miracle or a well-placed banana peel. And even if they could get down, the circulatory system wouldn't be thrilled. Picture the heart. Now imagine pumping blood uphill through a 6-meter neck. Lying down could cause fluid pooling, pressure shifts, or respiratory compression. Basically death by nap. Meanwhile, nearby dinosaurs like hadrosaurs or smaller theropods could squat or lie in safety. They could tuck in for the night like prehistoric chickens. But our standing friend, not a chance. Oddly enough, this isn't so far from how modern elephants manage their rest. Sure, elephants can lie down, but not for too long. Their weight can restrict blood flow or even crush internal organs if they stay down too long. So they prefer standing naps, dozing on their feet while occasionally rocking like they're listening to a sad ballad at a concert they didn't want to attend. Your dinosaur does just that now, rocks slightly. Maybe it's sleeping. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's bored. You'll never know. What you do know is that there's nothing accidental about how this creature is built. The feet. Let's talk about those. You look down and see something that resembles a fleshy pad more than a foot, like a built-in shock absorber wrapped around a giant spatula. Some species had a thumb claw on the forelimb, others didn't, but all had feet designed less for grip and more for evenly distributing weight across soft ground. Not so different from snowshoes, but considerably less stylish. Everywhere you look, this dinosaur is engineered like an earthbound suspension bridge, one that eats tree crowns for breakfast and ferns for dinner. The spine arches delicately, not to look elegant, but to manage torque. The ribs are reinforced not for breathing, but for holding up the ceiling of its own lungs. Even the hips, massive and flat, spread the load, like the foundation of a temple built for gods who snore standing up. You remember reading once about giraffes. They sleep just 30 minutes a day, often in 5-minute increments. And flamingos. They can sleep standing on one leg. You consider sharing this with the dinosaur, but something tells you it already knows. Thunder rumbles again. Another storm's on the horizon. But your dinosaur isn't phased. It shifts slightly, transferring weight to the other leg, and lets a slow breath escape, warm, moss-scented, and ancient. Then something startles you. A branch snaps in the dark, followed by the unmistakable sound of something much smaller moving fast. Probably a scavenger, or maybe a predator, hoping to sneak a snack from a sleeping giant. But the giant isn't sleeping, not really. Its tail flicks just once, a warning shot. It doesn't roar, doesn't stomp. It just reminds the world what happens if you get too close. And the night accepts that reminder. So you step back, awed again by just how complicated doing nothing can be. This dinosaur doesn't run, doesn't crouch, doesn't curl up like a house cat on a rainy day. But in that immobility is a kind of power, an active rest. A vigilance built from bone and burden and millions of years of never once taking a proper seat. You wonder as the wind picks up again what it would feel like to carry the world and never once set it down. The storm doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in first, a hush, then a stirring wind, then the unmistakable perfume of ozone and petrichor. You squint at the horizon, but the darkness is deceptive. What looks like the edge of night is actually a wall of rain slowly swallowing the landscape. You glance at the giant again. Still upright, still unbothered. But something's changed. There's a rhythm now to its movement. Slow shifts from side to side, almost imperceptible. At first you think it's reacting to the wind. Then you notice the eyes. Closed. It's sleepwalking. Okay, maybe not literally, but the effect is the same. The sauropod's limbs remain locked, body weight suspended between 4 columns, but the head droops slightly, swaying on that endless neck like the world's heaviest rope swing. Every so often, the creature realigns its posture with a twitch or subtle stomp, as if reminding gravity who's in charge. And now, the rain begins. Not in drops, but in sheets, like a giant turned over the sky's water bowl. You duck beneath a fern the size of a Volkswagen, wiping water from your eyes. The sound is overwhelming, like a million whispers at once. But the dinosaur doesn't flinch. Instead, it leans slightly against a gentle slope, posture steady despite the now muddy ground. Thunder growls. Wind hurls palm-sized leaves through the air. Smaller creatures bolt for cover, diving under logs, into burrows, even into each other. But not this one. It stays standing. And not just standing, but sleeping. Or something close to it. Paleontologists have long debated how sauropods might have achieved rest. Some theories suggest they entered a kind of polyphasic sleep, catching brief moments of slumber throughout the day and night, never going fully unconscious but never needing to. Others argue their slow metabolism and sheer mass made deep sleep unnecessary. That a few minutes of mental drift while standing still was enough to reset whatever needed resetting. Remember, these creatures didn't evolve for convenience. They evolved to outgrow predators, to stretch higher than fire, to carry their bodies across landscapes where the trees reached like mountains and the ground betrayed them with every soggy step. And in this storm, you can almost see it, the logic of never lying down. If it did, the mud would swallow it. The cold rain would clamp down on its joints. The surge of water could sweep a leg out from under it. And with that much weight falling isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. Instead, the sauropod weathers the chaos like a monument. You see its eyelids flutter once, just once, as if registering the roar of a nearby lightning strike. And then, stillness again. This, you realize, is the closest it ever comes to sleep. A trance, a moment. That might not seem so different from your own experience with insomnia. You pacing the kitchen at 2 a.m., making deals with your own nervous system. You nodding off on the train without ever closing your hand around the coffee cup. There's something oddly human about it, this half-sleep. This refusal to collapse. And speaking of collapse, you hear something snap nearby. Not thunder, not lightning. A tree. It crashes just meters away from the sauropod, startling a flock of proto-birds from a canopy. You instinctively duck, but the dinosaur doesn't move, doesn't flinch. Its tail shifts a degree. Its chest expands in a breath so slow, you think it might be dying. But no, it's fine. More than fine. It's been through storms before. Its bones have felt the punch of flash floods, the crackle of dry lightning, the scraping fingers of prehistoric wind. This isn't panic. This is protocol. The oddest part. You think it might even like the rain. Water slicks down its ridged spine, tracing little valleys along its hide. You watch as streams cascade over muscle and scale, highlighting the texture of a skin more like rubber than flesh. Parasites wash away. Dust clears. Maybe this is a bath. Maybe this is the only kind of bathing it ever gets. A creature this massive doesn't take cover. It makes the cover irrelevant. A flash of lightning lights the world in negative for a heartbeat, and you see the outline of the beast's skull against the storm high above you, serene in silhouette. And somewhere inside that skull, smaller than you'd expect, a peanut rattling in a cathedral. Something shifts. A thought, maybe. A dream. Historians still debate whether these giants dreamed at all. Brain scans of modern birds' distant descendants show REM cycles. But in sauropods, the brain was so small and so tightly packed that we're not sure if the neurochemical landscape existed for dreaming. If it did, maybe the dreams were slow, not symbolic, just textures, sensations, the feeling of wind against the ribs, the weight of sleep itself. You ask yourself, if you had a brain that small and a body that large, would you bother dreaming at all? Or would you simply be moment to moment half asleep under thunderclouds? The rain begins to slacken, and you notice something extraordinary. The creature is moving but not walking, just pivoting. One foot lifts, slightly rotates, settles. Then another, as if it's adjusting its position in a dance choreographed by instinct, executed by anatomy. The motion is slow and hypnotic, like a building subtly shifting its foundation. It's not going anywhere. But it's not asleep either. Not exactly. You sit down on a log and pull your coat tighter, watching as the last of the rain slides off the great beast's shoulders. It snorts once, then settles again into perfect stillness, its body swaying like a branch in the wind. And in that moment, you realize this might be the most peaceful thing you've ever seen. Not because it's passive, but because it's patient. And maybe that's what real sleep looks like when the world is heavy on your back. You wake again, if you ever truly slept, to a startling stillness. No wind, no rain, just the muffled sounds of dripping leaves and the almost ghostly silence that follows a storm. But the sauropod is still there, unmoved, except for one crucial detail. Its head. For the first time since you arrived, it's raised. And not just slightly, it's angled high, almost vertical, the great neck arcing into the pale morning like a living crane. It's a posture that feels impossible, even blasphemous, as if gravity should protest but doesn't dare. You follow the line upward, tracing the gentle S-curve of vertebrae stacked with the precision of cathedral columns. You try to imagine the weight being supported hundreds of kilograms of muscle, artery, bone, and brain fluid balanced above a torso like a prehistoric battleship. And here's where the arguments begin. Historians still debate whether sauropods could raise their necks vertically. You remember reading. On one side, some paleontologists insist that their necks were held low, almost horizontally, like garden hoses dragging through underbrush. Others argue the opposite, that sauropods could lift their heads high, feeding from treetops, surveying for threats, even scanning the sky like ancient sentries. What you're seeing now suggests the latter. But the truth may be more nuanced than either camp admits. Modern reconstructions of sauropod neck anatomy have revealed fascinating things. Their cervical vertebrae weren't simple stacked discs like ours. They were pneumatic, honeycombed with air sacs to reduce weight, like the bones of modern birds. This made their necks lighter than they looked, but also required incredibly strong tendons to keep everything in place. Even more curiously, some species had neural spines, bony projections on the vertebrae that angled backward like sailboat rigging. These likely anchored massive neck ligaments that functioned as tension cables, lifting and stabilizing the neck without continuous muscular effort. In simpler terms, you're watching a dinosaur that turned physics into a survival strategy. It raises its head higher still, almost fully upright now, and tilts its snout skyward. A few residual raindrops tumble from the crown of its skull. The animal doesn't flinch. Its breathing is slow, measured, like the inhale of someone inhaling not just oxygen, but history. You wonder what doesn't see. Is it scanning the treetops for fresh foliage? Is it smelling the air for predators? Or is this some kind of reset, like stretching after a long night of partial slumber? Odd fact of the day: giraffes, despite their length, sleep with their necks curled backward and heads resting on their hips because standing upright requires constant muscle tension. But our sauropod, it's doing the opposite. You notice how its eyes blink slowly, deliberately, without alarm. It's not afraid, not calculating, just aware, present. For a creature with such a small brain, it seems remarkably confident in the workings of its body. That's the thing about dinosaurs: they didn't need complexity to survive. They needed balance, metabolic efficiency, bone architecture that rivaled suspension bridges, and maybe, just maybe, a neck that could do more than just reach leaves. Maybe it lifted its head like this for social signaling. Imagine being one of 100 sauropods scattered across a floodplain. A raised head could be the prehistoric equivalent of a yo from across the meadow. Or a warning. Or a question. Some paleobiologists even speculate sauropods may have used their necks in combat. Not quite giraffe-style neck fighting, but a less dramatic version, like slow-motion fencing matches with vertebrae. There's no solid evidence for that, but no solid reason against it either. The creature begins to lower its neck now, not quickly, but like a drawbridge closing for the morning. Each movement is graceful, controlled. Vertebrae realign like a zipper sliding shut. You can hear the faint creak of tendons adjusting. A low rumble rises in its throat. Maybe a sigh, maybe something more primal. And here's where your thoughts drift, because you're starting to wonder about dreams again. If it could raise its neck like that in sleep, maybe part of its mind was always active. Like dolphins who let one half of their brain sleep while the other half stays alert. That would explain the movement, the balance, the lack of collapse. Standing tall might not just be a survival tactic. It might be the dream. The floating, the weightless sensation we chase in REM. Only this animal achieves it, vertically wrapped in tendons and silence, head touching the sky. And then it sneezes. Not a roar, not a snort. A genuine wobbling wet sneeze that sprays droplets in a glorious arc, and sends a pair of prehistoric dragonflies flailing off in opposite directions. You flinch, wipe your face, and laugh before you can stop yourself. Turns out even giants have allergies. It blinks again, utterly unconcerned, and resumes its slow groundward gaze. The rest of the herd is stirring now. Smaller ones nudge each other. One lets out a high-pitched vocalization that echoes like a woodwind through the trees. The air smells damp and green with that extra pinch of ammonia that comes after wet vegetation breaks down. The sun peeks through a tear in the clouds, casting long shadows that make the sauropod seem even taller. You feel like you're in a painting someone gave up on because it was too beautiful to finish. But for all the magic in the moment, the biology is brutally real. That neck is more than decorative. It's a tool of survival. A way to reach what no other animal can to keep the head far from predators, to see and be seen across vast, dangerous terrain. And here's one final thought that sticks with you like the smell of rain and old stone. This dinosaur never needed to lie down because it already lived in elevation. It didn't descend into sleep, it rose into it. As the head finally settles back into a more neutral posture, the beast lets out another soft rumble, more of a purr than a roar. And you sit there, wet, sore, blinking sunlight out of your eyes, realizing you've just watched something that probably hasn't happened in over 90 million years, but still feels familiar. There's a moment just before the heat returns when the earth is soft and breathing. Mist coils along the forest floor, collecting in little hollows, where ferns huddle together like secrets. The sauropod stands in that mist, unmoving, the base of its neck still beaded with leftover rain. It doesn't look tired, it looks permanent. You start thinking about lying down. Not you personally, although your spine is beginning to regret this time travel experiment, but about what it would mean for this animal. What happens if it just rests? And the answer is probably nothing good. Let's start with lungs. Your lungs expand and contract with the help of a diaphragm. When you lie down, gravity shifts and your lungs need more effort to move air. For something your size, it's manageable. For a creature that weighs more than a two-story house, it's a logistical nightmare. Some paleontologists believe that if sauropods had collapsed to rest, their lungs could have been crushed under their own body weight. And that's not even accounting for their long, thin necks, those elegant breathing tubes, suddenly folded awkwardly like trying to nap with a fire hose attached to your throat. That's why many experts think sauropods had a respiratory system more like birds than mammals. Air sacs, multiple chambers, a sort of unidirectional airflow system that let them take in oxygen continuously, even during exhale. But here's the catch: that system also works best upright. So if they lay down too long, those air sacs might not deflate properly, or worse, pressure from the gut or torso could cut off circulation entirely. Imagine trying to breathe while a cement truck naps on your chest. That's the vibe. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about survival. Even the circulatory system was risky. Their heart's massive multi-chambered powerhouses had to push blood vertically all the way up that ridiculous neck. We're talking 6 meters or more. That means extreme blood pressure, possibly the highest of any land animal that ever lived. Some reconstructions suggest sauropod blood pressure was over 600 mmHg. That's triple yours. That's your doctor screams and breaks the machine level. Now imagine disrupting that system by lying down. Blood pools in the wrong places. Vessels stretch. Pressure plummets. Getting back up could take so long that predators might have time to RSVP to dinner. So maybe they just didn't. You circle to the side of the sauropod, tracing your steps in the wet earth. Its eyes are open again, watching you. Watching nothing. Hard to say. You hear a low gurgling noise from somewhere deep inside its torso, like plumbing, remembering how to function. And then it poops. Massively. It's not subtle. You nearly lose your balance from the sheer force of the drop. The pile steams in the cool morning air, a mountain of digested foliage that could probably support a small ecosystem. Which, to be fair, it does. Two insects immediately dive in like it's Black Friday at the compost buffet. Odd fact, dinosaur dung is so important to paleontology that it has its own name, coprolite. Fossilized feces. And yes, people study it. It tells us what they ate, what they chewed, what they didn't chew. It even tells us about their parasites. Basically, it's prehistoric gossip. But here's the weird bit. Some scientists believe that sauropods may have used their digestive tracts as fermentation chambers. Not unlike cows, these behemoths likely had a multi-decade digestive process that slowly broke down tough plant matter into usable nutrients. And in that system, posture mattered. Standing upright might have aided digestion, just another reason not to lie down. You take a step back from the fresh dung, respectfully. The sauropod snorts either at you or at life in general. It shifts its rear leg again slowly, the way a person might adjust their weight at the bus stop after 2 hours of waiting. And for a split second, you wonder what happens if it does fall. Just once. Maybe a storm blows too strong. Maybe a slope gives way. Maybe it trips over the body of a fallen comrade. Paleontologists have found sites where adult sauropods seem to have died mid-stride, legs twisted, bodies crumpled. Some even theorize that getting up from a full sprawl was nearly impossible, like a flipped-over turtle but 70 tons heavier. In fact, there's evidence that many fossilized sauropods died not in battle, but in accidents, falling into rivers, getting stuck in mud, tipping in migration. A moment's error in balance could mean the end. Which is why evolution may have whispered, "Don't lie down." Ever. You glance at the herd again. Most are awake now, slowly moving, brushing past one another with Sioux indifference. But a few smaller individuals are resting, not fully lying, but leaning into mounds, legs partially bent. Maybe the younger ones can risk it. Maybe they haven't grown too heavy yet. Or maybe they're just too tired to care. But not the big one. Not your silent tower. Still upright. Still dignified. Still shaped like a natural law with skin. A distant roar echoes from the other side of the plain. A theropod, maybe. A reminder that the world hasn't gone soft just because the sun is up. But the sauropod doesn't respond. It blinks once, flips its tail lazily, and adjusts its breath the way a monk adjusts a mantra. You think about rest again, what it means to never feel the earth at your back. To never curl up. To never stop holding yourself up. That sounds exhausting. And maybe it is. But it's also incredible. Because this creature didn't survive by doing what felt good. It survived by doing what worked. So it stayed standing. And maybe that's the strangest kind of sleep there is. By now you've accepted that nothing about this animal is proportional. Not the size, not the shape, and definitely not the brain. You circle around again, eyeing the creature's head as it sniffs lazily at a tree crown. For all that neck, and we're talking a neck that could strangle a school bus, the skull is shockingly small, delicate even. A bird's skull that overshot its neck, daydreaming about height. You crouch on a mossy stone and try to guess how big is the brain. A soccer ball? A melon? Try a clenched fist. No, really. Many sauropods, especially the largest ones like Apatosaurus or Argentinosaurus, had brains weighing about 150 grams. That's about the same as 2 smartphones stacked. For an animal that could weigh as much as 10 elephants, it's comically disproportionate, like a filing cabinet balanced on a pea. And yet here it is. Not dead. Not extinct yet in your current narrative. Not brainless. Just efficient. See, the brain didn't need to be Einstein-sized because it didn't have to do complex calculations. No social intrigue, no tool-making, no political debates over fern rights. It needed to know where food was, where other sauropods were, and how not to fall over. 3 jobs, and it excelled at all 3. Still, that doesn't mean it didn't think. The idea that dinosaurs were dim-witted reptiles has been mostly debunked by now. Sure, this one isn't going to invent calculus, but it probably had basic emotional responses, awareness, bonding, perhaps even memory. Odd fact, scientists once hypothesized that sauropods had a second brain near their hips. Not an actual brain, but a neural processing center. A ganglion cluster so large that it was initially misidentified as another brain. This lump of nerve tissue may have helped control the hind legs and tail independently from the rest of the nervous system. Like having a regional manager for your butt. It's not confirmed, but it remains one of those paleontological rumors too delightful to die. You watch the dinosaur's head drift side to side in that hypnotic grazing rhythm. The eyes blink again. No hurry, no drama, just existing. But here's where it gets really weird. Despite the tiny brain, the creature appears to know when it's tired. Not tired like you with your alarms and coffee and 5 snooze button mornings. Tired like a machine that's processed enough sunlight and leaves to need a system reset. You notice the subtle signs again, the extra tail flicks, the leg shift, the soft hum from deep within its throat. It's not sleeping, but it's close. And that's when the question hits you. How does it know? Where in that golf ball of a brain is the I need sleep now button? Where's the dreaming switch? The off-mode scientists still argue about whether sauropods experience circadian rhythms like mammals do. Did they respond to day-night cycles, or were they more opportunistic, sleeping in short intervals whenever it was safe enough? Some clues come from fossil bone histology growth rings similar to trees. These rings show pause points, possibly aligned with seasons. It suggests at least some internal rhythm. But sleep REM, the kind where your eyes dart under closed lids while your brain turns memories into weird metaphors? We just don't know. You stand again stretching your back as you imagine what sleep must feel like for a creature with a skull shaped like a loaf of French bread and a brain the size of an avocado pit. It probably doesn't dream in images or stories. It might just pause, like a server entering sleep mode. The software's still running, but the screen's gone dark. But just for a moment, you remember seeing modern analogs, elephants gently swaying in their sleep heads, drooping eyelids flickering. Horses dozing in the sunlit fields, leg tendons locked. Even some bats enter a strange, half-aware torpor, their neural activity barely ticking while their bodies hang like forgotten fruit. And birds don't get started on birds. Some species can literally sleep with one eye open, shutting down half the brain at a time. They can fly while sleeping. That's not even science fiction. That's science fatigue. So maybe your sauropod does the same. Maybe this tiny brain flickers in and out like a rural internet signal. Enough to keep it from face planting, not enough to miss out on a good REM cycle. Another thing you notice now, its tail. It's long, obviously, but also never truly still. A ripple runs through it now and again, a lazy wave of muscle memory. You'd bet your last granola bar that it's unconscious. A reflex, maybe. Or a sort of sleep fidget. We all do it right, twitching in our sleep, rolling over, flexing toes. Your sauropod. It's doing that with a tail the length of a subway car. You smile, then yawn, because all this talk of sleep is making you tired. You sit again, this time near the base of a tree that's probably related to modern conifers. The scent is sharp and minty. A pair of beetles scuttle past your foot, utterly uninterested in your philosophical musings about prehistoric neurology. The sun's higher now. The clouds have mostly burned away. And your sauropod is still awake, but in that not-really-here way that long-haul truckers and new parents understand. It doesn't need a mattress. It doesn't need REM dreams about flying or falling. It just needs to not fall over, to not attract attention, to not collapse the fragile internal balance that lets it survive. That's rest for this animal. Not sleep, just less awake. You close your eyes for a second, syncing your breath with its rhythm, your heartbeat with the slow drumbeat of its movement. There's a serenity in it, a message if you care to find one. Even with a brain the size of a walnut, this creature knows how to stay alive. Sometimes that's enough. By mid-morning, the heat begins its slow climb. Not the oppressive kind that slaps you in the face, but a steady, patient heat that seeps into stone and bone alike. You wipe sweat from your brow and glance up at the giant, again still standing, still breathing like a wind-powered cathedral. But something's different now. Its tail, that massive tapering extension of its spine, the counterweight, the balancing rod. The dinosaur's forgotten fifth limb is more active. Not wildly, just subtly. A slow side-to-side movement, rhythmic, almost musical. It doesn't thrash, it doesn't drop. It floats low and deliberate, a serpent of muscle and memory. Most of us think of tails as decorations, optional accessories. But for sauropods, that tail is life insurance. Its sheer length offsets the enormous neck, redistributing weight and helping the dinosaur keep center balance without collapsing like a bad folding chair. Some tails had up to 80 vertebrae, more bones than most humans have in their entire bodies. And that movement, that's not random. Many scientists now believe sauropod tails acted like gyroscopic stabilizers, tools of real-time balance correction. As the neck swayed or the legs shifted, the tail compensated, adjusting the dinosaur's center of mass, like a dancer using her arms to keep from tipping. So even in sleep or in that pseudo-sleep fugue state, your friend here seems to favor. The tail remains active, vigilant, the night shift of the body. You imagine it like this: the dinosaur closes its eyes, lets the front half go quiet, and the tail keeps watch. A sinewy sentinel, half asleep but never fully still. We see similar things in animals today. Cats twitch their tails in dreams. Horses flick theirs in unconscious irritation. Birds on perches will let one leg go slack while adjusting tail feathers to compensate for balance. Nature, as always, is an overachiever in design. You stand again curious now and creep around behind the dinosaur's swaying tail. Probably not the smartest idea, especially if it gets startled. But curiosity wins. You want to see what that tail is doing. It moves like a living pendulum tip, slicing through humid air, never touching the ground. You imagine it must weigh hundreds of kilograms, and yet it drifts like it's underwater. You half expect to hear it hum. There's a theory, a wild one but supported by physics, that some sauropod tails could crack like whips, like literal supersonic whips. A single rapid flick that could create a sonic boom. Imagine being a predator and getting that for breakfast. No one's proven it definitively, but certain tail vertebrae seem designed for speed and flexibility. And even if your friend here doesn't crack its tail like a living bullwhip, it absolutely uses it for communication. A swish left might mean back off. A twitch right might signal movement to the herd. Or perhaps it's just dreaming in muscle, little micro-adjustments echoing whatever fragment of memory is cycling through that tiny brain. You step back as the tail arcs near your position. No threat, just a boundary. An unconscious drawing of a circle that says, "This is mine, this is me, stand there." And so you do. Because that tail isn't just an extension of the body. It's a living balancing act holding up everything that shouldn't be possible. Without it, the sauropod would tip forward, collapse onto its face, and probably never get up again. It's like a biological tightrope walker's pole, invisible until you pay attention, and then you can't stop seeing it. Which makes you think, how often do we miss the things that hold us up just because they're behind us? You blink. Got too philosophical there for a moment. Blame the heat. The dinosaurs shift again just a little. One foreleg lifts, settles. The tail responds instantly. A flick, a counter flick. The whole machine rebalances itself like a skyscraper swaying slightly in the wind to keep from toppling. Engineers spend lifetimes designing buildings with that kind of poise. This one just exists. Odd fact: sauropod tails are among the most frequently damaged bones in fossil records. Stress fractures, healed breaks, compression. Not from fights, these animals weren't brawlers, but from use. Constant, persistent use. It's like having a spine that moonlights as a suspension bridge and a metronome. You hear something behind you. Another smaller dinosaur, bipedal quick-footed, clearly annoyed by your presence, scampers past with a sound like angry scissors. You both flinch. The sauropod doesn't. Its tail lifts slightly in response, not defensively, just awareness. Like a lighthouse beam sweeping once across the shore just in case. That's when it hits you. It's not just that the tail never droops. It can't. It doesn't have the luxury. Drooping would mean failure. Drooping would mean imbalance. And for a creature, this massive imbalance means a crash with consequences you could feel in another time zone. Even in rest, even half asleep, even blinking into eternity like a living monolith, it must keep its tail in motion. Because sleep for this creature isn't surrender, it's strategy. So you sit again, careful not to disturb the rhythm. You match your breathing to the sway of that tail. Left, pause. Right, pause. Each movement slow, predictable, like a lullaby for gravity itself. And just when you think you've seen everything, it does something new. It stops. For a full minute, the tail hangs in perfect stillness, not a muscle quivering. Then slowly, very slowly, it lowers. Not to the ground, but close. A few inches above the ferns. You feel the shift before you understand it. The sauropod is entering deeper rest. Not lying down, never that. But letting the tail droop just slightly is the closest thing it has to vulnerability. And for some reason, it trusts this moment. Maybe it's the herd nearby. Maybe it's the warm light. Maybe it's you. Probably not, but still. You don't move, you barely breathe. And then, without fanfare, the tail lifts again. One vertebra at a time. No rush, no sign that anything happened. But, you saw it. The tail let go, just for a moment, and it didn't fall. There's a soft stillness in the air now, that peculiar kind of quiet that settles only after a long shared breath between worlds. The sauropod still stands, always stands, but you're not the only one watching anymore. From the east across the mist-draped meadow, a shadow moves. It's faster, lower to the ground. You instinctively duck behind a broad-leafed plant the size of a satellite dish. Predator. A theropod. You don't know which genus, and frankly, you don't want to get close enough to count toes. Let's just call it something unpleasant, something with teeth. It's clearly a carnivore. You can tell by the way it moves shoulders, hunched tail-level gait, like it's pacing out your odds. It stalks the edge of the clearing with the precision of a violinist tuning to tension. Closer now, closer. And the sauropod. It doesn't flinch, not a muscle. That's when you realize something counterintuitive. It's not that predators didn't hunt the giants, it's that the giants were just too much work. Historians still debate whether large predators like Allosaurus or Mapusaurus regularly hunted adult sauropods or simply scavenged the dead. There's fossil evidence of tooth marks on sauropod bones, yes, but many of those are post-mortem. When it comes to a full-grown standing adult, the costs may have outweighed the reward, literally. Because what exactly is a predator supposed to do? Lunge at a leg the size of a Greek column and hope it snaps dodge? A tail that could knock you into another geologic era? One wrong move and it's not lunch, it's a flattening. The predator steps forward. Closer still. It pauses, nostrils flaring clearly, weighing its options. You crouch lower, silently praying you're less interesting than a leaf. The sauropod turns its head slowly, lazily, like it's just remembered something vaguely annoying. One eye locks onto the predator. No sound, no movement. And then one breath. A massive huffing exhale from nostrils that look like chimney pipes. The theropod freezes. There's no bluff charge, no roar, just a reminder that this thing is awake even if only partially. The predator lingers, weighing instinct against probability. You watch the muscles in its legs coil, preparing for a pounce or a reed. Then the tail twitches, just once. Not a whip crack, not a strike, just enough movement to suggest that it could. That's all it takes. The theropod turns, not in panic, not in shame, just pragmatism. It walks away muttering whatever version of not today its nervous system allows. And just like that, the balance resets. You exhale finally. The plant you've been hiding behind releases a puff of pollen in protest. The sauropod shifts its weight again, leg muscles flexing like ancient pistons. You think about how often this must have happened, smaller predators testing their luck, only to realize that being big and vertical makes you an unsavory target. Because when you never lie down, you're never caught off guard. You're always halfway prepared. It's the same principle behind certain prey animals today. Zebras and antelope often sleep standing. Horses too. Less downtime equals less vulnerability. Because let's face it, nothing good ever happens to the guy lying on the ground when the trouble starts. And here's another odd fact for the day: modern elephants, which occasionally sleep lying down, still prefer to rest upright when they feel unsafe. Their sheer size makes standing the smarter option even when exhausted. Sound familiar? But for sauropods, lying down wasn't just risky. It was inefficient. Getting up again required a level of maneuvering that bordered on gymnastic. Their legs didn't tuck like a bird's. Their torsos didn't fold. It was like trying to stand up from a swimming pool without using your arms while wearing a sofa. You glance at the herd now. A few juveniles huddle closer together, necks weaving like threads in a tapestry. They look nervous but not terrified. The adult, your steadfast tower, simply returns to nibbling leaves, as if nothing happened. Because to it, maybe nothing did. This wasn't a moment of fear, it was Tuesday, and that leads you to another realization. Maybe the ability to sleep standing wasn't just evolutionary, it was strategic. Always being on alert, always ready to move may have meant surviving just one more day. And one more. And one more until your bones outlived even the rivers. You step back a few paces, trying not to spook the sauropod, though you're pretty sure nothing short of a meteor could accomplish that. The ferns rustle beneath your feet, the scent of rain and foliage still thick in the air. And then you notice something else. Another predator, smaller, opportunistic, watching from a nearby slope. But it doesn't come close, not even tempted. You realize the sauropod stillness is an armor in itself. There's something terrifying about an animal so massive that it doesn't need to move. Something about a creature that guards itself not by reacting, but by enduring. There's a lesson in that if you want it. The predator slinks off. The tension breaks. A gentle breeze rolls through the canopy like a sigh. And for the first time in what feels like hours, you let yourself sit fully back against the warm bark of a prehistoric tree. You watch the dinosaur's flank rise and fall in slow, ponderous rhythm, standing, always standing. Even when danger circles, even when sleep claws at the edges, it rests, but it never surrenders posture, and it never has to. Because sometimes being unmovable is the loudest message of all. The sun has finally claimed the day. The dew has dried. The air smells less like wet stone and more like warming resin, that sharp scent of baking bark and unspoken stories. You squint at the horizon, rubbing the crust from your eyes, only to realize something unnerving. The herd is on the move. Not a stampede, not a migration, just a slow collective shifting. One sauropod starts to step forward, then another. Like a massive conversation no one needed to speak. You rise, knees cracking, and watch as the ground begins to pulse under their weight. The giant you've been studying, the one that never lays down, takes the lead. Of course it does. Its first steps are precise and deliberate. You half expect the earth to open up just to let it pass. It moves like a glacier with better knees. Each footfall depresses the earth, creating instant puddles where none existed before. But what's remarkable, what truly stuns you, is that they don't stop moving. Even when one of the smaller ones leans into another for a brief rest, even when the younger ones appear sluggish or distracted, they all remain standing. Constant motion, constant awareness. Some paleontologists suggest sauropods might have traveled in near constant migration, not because they couldn't rest, but because their bodies required movement to process food. Remember, these creatures consumed hundreds of pounds of vegetation per day, like a living wood chipper, and to keep that internal engine running, they had to move. Some researchers have even proposed that sauropods had digestive systems dependent on kinetic movement, the gentle rocking of the body, helping fermentation gases escape like a massive biological wine barrel. Charming, disgusting, probably true. And so they walked, but not mindlessly. You start to notice a pattern, like a shifting murmuration of giants. One pauses, the others slow. One speeds up, the others compensate. It's like a rolling wave but made of mass and instinct. You wonder how they navigate. Are they following a scent? A memory? Is it passed through subtle sounds, deep rumbles too low for your ears to catch? Historians still debate whether sauropods communicated through infrasound frequencies beneath the range of human hearing. Some modern animals do this. Elephants, whales, even crocodilians. Deep resonating sounds that travel through the ground. If sauropods did the same, it could explain how a herd the size of a stadium could move in unity without constant visual cues. As you follow behind, keeping your distance from the tail swing radius, you've learned that lesson. You notice how the herd doesn't move like a monolith. It moves like a system, a living organism made of many bodies, each one alert, upright, and somehow resting while in motion. Sleepwalking. Not quite, but something close. A kind of ambulatory trance where half the brain stays online while the legs handle autopilot. Odd fact, some birds and marine mammals can perform coordinated group movements while sleeping. It's been observed in flocks and pods, animals gliding through the world in low brain power mode, avoiding obstacles, maintaining position, all while neurologically half asleep. You wonder, is that what this is? A migrating dream? The forest thins ahead. Open space. A dried riverbed stretches out like a wound through the landscape, and the herd begins to cross. One by one, massive feet disturb the cracked clay. Dust lifts. The air fills with the scent of old water and dry time. You see juveniles pressed closer to the center now. Adults fan out around them, not protectively, not obviously, but purposefully. One older sauropod walks along the rear, trailing slower, its tail occasionally tapping a younger one back into line. The dinosaurs never speak, but they communicate. And through it all, still none of them lie down. One youngster stumbles slightly, catches itself. Its legs splay, not dramatically, but just enough to make your chest tighten. The adult nearest it stops instantly, waits, lets the smaller one adjust, then resumes. You wonder what happens if one actually falls. There are fossils that suggest sauropods did sometimes collapse and couldn't recover. Entire skeletons have been found in positions that imply sudden, unrecoverable falls. Limbs twisted, necks torqued, sometimes in herds, sometimes alone. Nature didn't install a reset button on animals this size. So maybe that's the deeper reason for this constant movement. Not just digestion, not just communication, but insurance. You keep moving, you don't fall. You don't fall, you don't die. Simple as that. The herd reaches the far side of the riverbed and pauses, not to rest, but to assess. You can see one turn its head toward the tree line, sniffing the wind, tasting the next decision. You watch your original sauropod, the tall one, the sentinel, hold a position near the front. Still standing, still carrying the impossible. And it hits you, this is how they sleep. Not in one block, not all at once, but in shifts. Micro naps. Rotations, a rolling rest that flows through the herd like a circulating pulse. While one half rests, the other moves. While one slows, the others skeamakas. It's not downtime, it's choreography. You step aside as a juvenile stumbles past you, clearly half aware. Its eye half-lidded, its steps uneven. But it doesn't fall. It walks on. And behind it, that massive adult, your tower, your sleepless myth, flicks its tail just once. A cue, a touch, keep moving. And the herd does. Across the earth, like a continent in motion. Silent. Resting yet never still. Sleeping but never surrendering to sleep. You've lost track of how long you've been following them. The sun is higher now, casting long shadows that bend behind the sauropods like dragged history. Every step they take seems to echo off the landscape, not in noise, but in weight. The ground remembers them. And then there it is again, that sound. Creaking. Not from the trees, not from the forest around you, from them. It's subtle at first, almost like branches shifting in wind. But there is no wind. Not anymore. And the sound is deeper, older, like the inside of a ship hull, like beams flexing under pressure. You pause and tilt your head. It's coming from joints. One of the adults is shifting again, a gentle lean into one leg. With the movement comes a noise that's hard to describe, a low, groaning whir of tendons sliding cartilage, protesting ligaments, realigning. It's not painful. It's not even strained. It's simply mechanical. These creatures are biomechanical wonders. They were never meant to be silent. Some paleontologists think these joint sounds might have been common, even expected natural side effects of supporting dozens of tons of mass. Think about the sheer stress on knees, hips, ankles, if you can call them that, carrying the load of a jetliner without metal, just biology. And they weren't built like mammals. Sauropods had unique joint structures, especially in the hips and shoulders, where long bones met shallow sockets with dense cartilage pads. Joints weren't like hinges. They were more like rotating pressure platforms. Smoother, slower, but louder. And so they creaked. You watch one stop mid-stride and shift its weight like a tired elevator realigning itself. The noise that follows is low and vibrating like the groan of old wood. You feel it in your chest more than your ears. It's haunting, but somehow comforting, like the world itself is sighing. You imagine the night is here silent, except for those gentle structural noises. Sleeping birds in the trees, wind across ferns. And beneath it all, the barely audible creak of giants rocking in their rest. Odd fact, in certain fossil beds, paleontologists have found telltale wear patterns on bones suggesting habitual stress. Elbow joints ground slightly flat. Hip sockets thickened by repetitive load-bearing. These weren't injuries. They were the byproducts of lifetimes spent standing, sleeping, shifting, swaying. The longer you watch, the more you realize these noises may have been part of the social soundscape, oral cues shared between members of the herd. Maybe they even learned to recognize one another by the rhythm of their own skeletons, a kind of body music older than any vocalization. You glance at your tower again, your sleepless marvel. As it moves, the groans from its limbs deepen. It leans forward slightly as if to sniff something or to adjust posture. Each movement is slow, deliberate, accompanied by its own natural soundtrack. It isn't loud, but it is unmistakable. And now, for the first time, the dinosaur makes a sound from its mouth. Not a roar, not a bellow, a long, low-frequency moan that warbles near the edge of the hearing. It trembles the leaves on nearby trees. It causes a ripple in a shallow puddle. You realize this is communication. Scientists believe sauropods may have had vocal abilities we still don't understand. Their elongated tracheas and possible resonating chambers in the neck may have produced infrasound calls, deep rumbles that could travel miles through the air or the earth. Elephants do this today. It's eerie, beautiful, and entirely practical. And now standing there, you realize the creaking joints and soft vocalizations blend together. A mechanical-sounding lullaby, a language of motion and maintenance. The rest of the herd seems to respond. Another adult emits a lower rumble. The juvenile pause. Even the trees go still as if listening. And then the lead sauropod moves again. A grand pivot, its tail sweeping through the air like a curtain being drawn on the past. It shifts direction slightly, a new course decided by whatever ancient compass lives in its bones. You follow, marveling at the idea that this dinosaur has possibly not fully rested in years, decades, maybe its entire life. Sleep has always come in fragments, in sways, in short, careful shifts. It's never let go, and you begin to wonder what that does to a creature, not just physically but emotionally. If emotions even apply, does it long to lie down? Does it crave the sensation of weightlessness, of surrender? Or is that a human idea, our need to escape gravity for a few hours to stretch out on something soft and trust the world to leave us alone? Your tower does not dream of cushions. It dreams perhaps of balance, of not falling, of bearing. And as you trudge on behind it, you start to hear its joints again. Soft creaks. Rhythmic now that you've tuned in. A lullaby made from ligaments and motion. Historians still debate how much of this noise was involuntary. Some argue that the best sauropods were silent movers, that creaking was a sign of age or stress. Others believe it was simply part of life. When you're that size, everything you do becomes part of the environment. Either way, you find yourself hypnotized. Not just by the sounds, but by the idea that something so possibly large could exist with such quiet dignity. Creaking, sure, but never collapsing. And maybe that's the most restful sound of all. You reach a clearing dotted with the ancient bones of those who didn't quite make it. The forest gives way to soft, sun-bleached soil, scattered with fragments, long femurs half buried, a rib cage crumbling like a forgotten bridge. This is no accident. This place remembers. The sauropods pause here, not to mourn, not the way you would, but there's a subtle shift in their pace, a stillness. Your sleepless sentinel stops mid-step, 1 foot hovering just above the earth, as if it knows where not to tread. You approach cautiously. The bones are massive, some still arranged roughly where the animal once fell. Vertebrae arch and slow collapse, the neck ending abruptly at what was once a skull. You crouch beside the remains and reach out, not to touch, just to acknowledge. These are the fossils of creatures that likely never lay down until they died. There's a chilling poetry to it. They stood their entire lives, and then only once they didn't, and the earth held them there forever. Some of the fossil beds where sauropods have been found, like those in Patagonia or the Morrison Formation in North America, suggest death came swiftly mid-motion. In several, paleontologists have discovered skeletons slumped forward, legs splayed unnaturally, necks twisted, as if they simply lost the balance they had clung to for decades. Historians still debate whether these deaths were due to illness, injury, or just the weariness of gravity after too many years. But one theory stands out: they may have died standing up, then collapsed only in death. You glance up at your living tower again. Still standing, still breathing. But now you wonder, how close has it come? Has it stumbled before? Has it felt that moment of panic when a foot doesn't land quite right, when a joint gives too much? The herd begins to move around the fossil site, careful, precise. You can see juveniles glancing at the bones, sniffing, then looking away. It's not grief, not the way humans express it, but it's awareness, a recognition. Odd fact: certain modern animals, elephants for example, appear to react to the bones of their own kind. They touch them, linger near them, sometimes carry fragments. No one knows exactly why. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's just curiosity. But maybe it's also respect. You walk farther into the bone field and find something stranger, a set of tracks fossilized in mudstone leading directly to the fallen sauropod. The stride is long, steady, and suddenly ends in a deep impression, one final footprint larger than a bathtub followed by nothing. It didn't fall gently. It didn't curl up or go quiet. It stopped, and the ground has remembered that moment for millions of years. Your own footprints now mix with ancient ones. A little disrespectful, maybe, but unavoidable. The air is hot and dry here, dust dancing between the ribs of giants. A few small creatures scurry past your ankles, descendants perhaps of those that fed on these carcasses long ago. You remember reading about death assemblages fossil beds, where dozens, sometimes hundreds of bones collect from multiple individuals. Some are theorized to be natural traps, sinking mud, flash floods, volcanic ash, the kind of places where lying down was never the plan, but always the outcome. And maybe some of those dinosaurs tried to rest, just for a moment, just to shift the pain from one leg to another. And it cost them everything. You step carefully back toward the herd, your boots now pale with powdered history. Your sauropod watches you not directly, not intensely, but with the same side glance it's used for predators. Trees the setting sun. It sees you. It notes you. Then it moves again. Forward. Out of the clearing of bones. Away from what it refuses to become. And the rest follow. You walk behind them slower now, listening again to the creaks of joints, the soft rumble of breath, the rhythmic thud of footfalls on earth. The fossils lie behind you, but the weight of them does not. And here's the strange part, you feel oddly comforted, because now you understand these creatures didn't fear sleep. They just couldn't afford to lie down. So they walked, they stood, they swayed, and only when everything else gave way did they finally fall. You glance over your shoulder one last time. The bones remain, but they don't feel like a warning anymore. They feel like monuments to endurance, to balance, to the unimaginable poetry of a creature that chose to sleep standing tall because anything else would mean never waking up again. As the herd crests a gentle rise and slips into the dappled shade of a tall forest, something overhead catches your eye. A flicker of motion, a ripple in the canopy. Wings, not the leathery, dramatic flaps of pterosaurs. No, these are feathered, small, darting. You look up just in time to see a group of primitive birds flutter between branches, their silhouettes sharp against the sunlight. And just like that, the story shifts. Because while the ground trembles under sauropod weight, the air whispers of their future. The birds above chirp softly, nothing impressive, just sharp, precise sounds. One of them hops onto a nearby vine and blinks at you, head tilted like it's weighing your worth. You blink back. It's not trying to be dramatic, but it is. Because that tiny feathered body lighter than your lunch is carrying a memory so old, it forgets to question it sleeping while standing. Some birds sleep in flight. Others roost upright on branches. Flamingos sleep on one leg. Chickens doze while standing until they get tired enough to nestle down. Even pigeons, bless their dirty little hearts, can rest mid-perch with half their brain turned off. Unihemispheric sleep, it's called. And where did they get that from? Evolution doesn't invent from scratch. It repurposes, modifies, whispers old tricks into new ears. And so it's not a stretch to think the standing rest behavior of today's birds could be an echo, a faint one, of what their giant ancestors once perfected. Your sauropod pauses beneath a wide-limbed tree. One of the birds flits down to a branch just above its head. The size contrast is laughable. One weighs barely 100 grams, the other 70 tons, but they're both upright, both still, both completely aware, and maybe both resting. Odd fact, modern ostriches, among the largest of the flightless birds, have some of the shortest sleep cycles of any vertebrate. They lie down occasionally, but they also engage in standing rest with periods of REM sleep that look almost identical to when they're lying down. Researchers still don't know how much deep sleep they truly require, but whatever it is, it's fast, light, and often vertical. And that's not just coincidence. That's genetic memory. Birds are dinosaurs, not just cousins, not just neighbors on the evolutionary tree. They are dinosaurs, just further down the line wearing different jackets. When you look at your sauropod and then look at these birds, you're not seeing past and present. You're seeing one long wobbling thread of time. One that stretches from thunder-limbed titans to the skittering gossip of sparrows. Historians still debate whether sauropods and early avians interacted much, but we've found fossils of primitive birds living at the same time in the same regions. They shared the air while the giants ruled the ground. And maybe at night they all did the same thing, rested without falling. You sit beneath the tree and watch as one of the birds begins to doze. It tucks its head beneath a wing but doesn't crouch, doesn't nestle, just stands. One eye closed, one open, brain half off. Meanwhile, your sauropod lowers its neck slightly. Eyes heavy again, tail flicking once. A shared stillness. Two creatures so different yet somehow echoing the same ancient strategy. You wonder what they're dreaming about. If birds dream of flight, does the sauropod dream of never falling? Or does it even dream at all? Maybe dreaming isn't the point. Maybe standing is. You think about it now, the legacy of the standing sleeper. A trait so strange it feels accidental, but it persists. Through continents, climates, and extinctions, passed down in bone and muscle and the smallest circuits of instinct. It's not elegant. It's not comfortable. It works. And in evolution, that's more than enough. You stretch your legs and lean back against the tree trunk, eyes flicking between your towering friend and the fluttering dots in the branches above. One heavy as gravity, one light as thought, but both shaped by the same shadow of the ages. Maybe that's why the sauropods never laid down. Not because they were cursed by weight, but because they had already passed on the secret to something smaller, something that could carry it farther. You glance up. The bird is gone. And the dinosaur still standing. Still swaying. Still ancient. The forest opens again, wider this time, into a broad, sun-washed meadow scattered with cycads and horsetails. The air here is warmer, almost still, like the breath of something sleeping just below the surface. Your sauropod stops near the edge, half shaded by a stand of ginkgos, and lowers its neck just slightly. Not to eat, not to move, just to be. You sit cross-legged in the grass, watching it from a respectful distance. There's something different in the air now, and it takes you a minute to recognize it. This is as close to dreaming as you've ever seen it. The dinosaur's eyelids flutter, not closed, not fully, but in soft, rhythmic pulses. Its chest rises and falls, slowly. The tail twitches but lazily, not reactive, just drifting. And the eyes. Those ancient amber eyes are glassy, unfocused, not scanning for predators, not watching the herd. Just staring into a horizon that doesn't seem to exist. You're watching a 6-meter skull try to rest. Which brings the question back again, did they dream? Historians still debate whether sauropods ever entered REM sleep. The structure of their brains, small, streamlined, specialized, doesn't scream dreamer. But absence of proof isn't proof of absence. And modern birds, despite their tiny brains, absolutely do experience REM. So maybe it's not about size. Maybe it's about necessity. Birds dream of danger and flight. Elephants dream in images. Scientists believe they even replay events. Rats dream in mazes. Dogs bark in their sleep. And cuttlefish. They literally change color while dreaming. So could a sauropod with its walnut brain and cathedral body have dreams? Odd fact, REM sleep often correlates with memory consolidation in animals. It's the phase where the brain organizes files and replays. So if your sauropod ever dreamed, what would it remember? Would it replay a walk through a storm? The scent of ferns, the flicker of a predator's eyes. Would it remember that one odd day a small bipedal creature you followed it through the forest, or would its dreams be simpler? Weight shifts, temperature changes, pressure at the joints, the hum of tendon and time. Not dreams like ours, dreams like breath. You scoot a little closer, still careful, still quiet. You don't want to wake it if that's even the right word for what this is. It's not asleep the way you sleep. It's not unconscious, just disengaged. Like a ship on autopilot. Like a memory drifting inside a body that's learned how not to fall. It reminds you of the elderly, those who wake suddenly in the middle of the night with stories that don't quite match reality but feel more real than the present. This dinosaur isn't here, not entirely. Its mind is somewhere else. Not deeper, just farther. You look around at the meadow. The other sauropods are doing it too. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in subtle ways. A drop of the head, a slowing of the breath, a stillness. You're watching a herd that's entered a collective rest without ever lying down. And in that stillness, you feel something strange begin to settle inside you. You wonder what it means to be this large, this alive, and this quiet. To spend your entire life holding yourself up, never once letting the earth cradle you. What does that do to a soul if such a thing exists in 50-ton increments? Maybe that's the tragedy. Or maybe that's the miracle. To carry your weight every day and still have enough left over to dream with your eyes half open. The sauropod makes a low sound now, less of a call, more of a hum. You feel it before you hear it. A vibration in your ribs, a gentle pressure in your ears. It's not meant for you, but you catch a little of it anyway. Is that part of the dream? Maybe that's what they do in this state. They communicate without knowing. A sound shared in a resting body passed from one standing sleeper to the next. A ripple of breath and presence. A song without lyrics. A lullaby in seismic frequency. You lie back now in the grass staring at the sky. A few birds glide overhead tracing the same air that their ancestors once felt with leathery wings. You wonder what they dream of too. Maybe of walking. Maybe of once being giants. Maybe nothing at all. The sauropod hasn't moved. Not really. A flick of the ear, a shift of the weight. But its core, its breath, its posture, its ancient patience remains unchanged. And somehow, in that motionless form, you feel time bend around you. The meadow feels eternal, the moment infinite. You're not sure how long you lie there. Long enough for the sun to inch a little higher. Long enough for the tail to sway once more. Long enough to wonder whether you too have entered some kind of half-sleep. And maybe that's the secret, you have to be halfway asleep to feel what they feel. To understand what it means to dream while never letting go of the weight that keeps you upright. The dinosaur blinks once, then resumes its steady breath. Still standing, still dreaming. And for now, that's enough. You awaken not suddenly but gently, the way a tide recedes, without asking permission. The light has shifted. The herd is moving again, though slower now, as if time has lengthened around them. And your sleepless guardian, still vertical, still dragging the sky behind its shoulders. But something's changed. As it walks ahead of the others, you notice a rhythm more measured, more deliberate. One foot lingers longer in the air before it lands. The steps are smaller, more careful. And then you see it. The front right leg bends just slightly. Not a full bend. Just enough to suggest a question, could it, if it had to. Here's where the debate begins again. Historians still argue about knees. Not metaphorically, literally. The anatomy of sauropod legs remains one of paleontology's most discussed mysteries. Specifically, could they bend their legs enough to lie down and get back up again? Some say yes. The argument goes like this: fossil evidence shows articular surfaces on the knee and ankle joints, meaning movement was possible. The rear limbs resemble those of modern elephants, straight but not locked, capable of crouching when necessary. Surely the logic follows sauropods could lie down, maybe not gracefully, but functionally. Others say absolutely not. This school of thought insists that sauropods were simply too big to risk the process, that any attempt to lower their bodies to the ground would result in torn ligaments, crushed lungs, or a kind of mechanical paralysis, falling and never rising. That they evolved for a life of perpetual standing because gravity itself was their greatest threat. The truth, as always, likely sits in the middle. Some individuals, perhaps younger or smaller, could fold themselves into the earth for short periods, maybe during illness, maybe at night in tightly knit herds. But for the titans, those with more weight than a semi-truck, the calculus was different. Even if their joints could bend, that didn't mean they should. Odd fact, some modern animals like giraffes do possess foldable legs but still choose to remain standing for sleep due to the risk of predation. Giraffes can lie down and sometimes do, but rarely, and only in safe environments. The cost of getting up is just too high. You walk slowly, following your sauropod's stride, eyes fixed on the shifting weight of its knees. There's a fascinating choreography to it, the way it resists full flexion, the way tendons visibly strain to stabilize each step. You imagine what it would take to lower that much body. The rear legs would have to splay slightly, the forearms folding under the neck, curling sideways, all without tearing vital muscle or disturbing balance, like parking a cruise ship in a sandbox without spilling the anchor. It's not impossible, just ill-advised. And maybe that's why there are no fossil beds filled with curled-up sauropods, no sleeping poses, no nest rings, just bodies caught mid-stride or collapsed in awkward, unnatural angles, frozen forever in the position that killed them. Because if you ever saw a sauropod on the ground, it likely wasn't resting. It was surrendering. Your giant crest another gentle hill casting a long shadow that overlaps with yours. You glance at the other members of the herd watching for signs, knee movement, elbow flexing, anything resembling preparation to recline. Nothing. They continue in their drifting trance, heads low, tails swinging legs like pistons in a machine too old to break. And yet something catches your eye. A younger sauropod, perhaps only a third the size of the adult, peels slightly off to the side and lowers itself. Not all the way, not in the slow spiral of sleep. Just into a partial crouch, its front legs bending at the elbow, head bowing. It looks awkward, like a construction crane being dismantled. But it doesn't fall. It rests, just for a few minutes. Then, with a strained groan and a flick of its tail, it rises again slowly, muscles visibly trembling with the effort. You hear one of the adults rumble softly in response. Not disapproval, not warning, just acknowledgement. Maybe the younger ones still have options. Maybe the privilege of folding belongs only to those who haven't grown too large to lift. You exhale. It's a lot to think about, especially considering you're talking about knees. But knees, like all joints, are promises. They say, yes, you may lower yourself, but only if you can rise again. Your sauropod. It stopped asking. It knows better. And in that restraint is wisdom. You sit again, resting your own knees because, let's be honest, they've done nothing close to heroic and still ache like you've climbed Everest. You lean back, eyes half closed, watching giant step carefully into the wind. There's a lesson in this too. That sometimes can doesn't mean should. That surviving isn't always about exercising your full range, it's about knowing your limits and respecting them. The dinosaurs continue. Their silhouettes blur slightly in the heat. Shimmer a moving line of breath and biology. And you, small and blinking in the grass, feel oddly honored to witness it. Not because they're majestic, not because they're ancient, but because they walk forward every day on knees they never dare to test. The shadows stretch long and lean as the sun begins its descent, casting the herd in a golden wash that makes them appear even more otherworldly, like time has caught fire and you're just watching it burn slowly across their backs. You're tired. That crept up on you. It's not just physical, it's something deeper. A fatigue, not from walking, but from watching. From trying to imagine what it must be like to carry that much weight, that much history, and still never lay it down. The herd slows as they approach another rise. This one's different. The slope is subtle, but wide, like a broad shoulder carved into the land itself. It's the kind of place that catches the last light of the day and holds on to it for just a few moments longer than anything else. And at the front, still leading, still silent, your sleepless titan. It stops, not in alarm, not in reaction, just as if it's decided this is far enough for now. The rest of the herd follows suit, fanning out across the hilltop, each one finding a patch of level ground. The air is soft here. Still, even the insects seem to whisper now. You watch as your giant exhales again. It doesn't lower its head, it doesn't bend its legs. It just breathes, deep and slow. You swear you can feel it from where you stand. There's something mythic about it. Something so stubbornly alive it defies being past tense. A creature too large for the fossil record to hold, too patient for panic, too balanced to need relief. And now in this final hour of day, it seems more than ancient. It seems eternal. You look at the others again. Still no one lies down. Still no nests. No huddles. Just standing forms and half silhouettes blinking in the glow of a sun they've seen set 1,000 times. Maybe this is what sleep looks like when you outgrow the need for softness. A kind of active stillness. A vow never to give in to the pull of gravity. Not because they fear it, but because they've mastered it. Odd fact, when whales sleep, they rise just beneath the surface, bodies suspended in vertical columns. They don't move, they just float. Marine biologists call it logging because the whales resemble floating logs. Motionless, yet profoundly alive. That's what this is. But on land, your sauropod stands spine straight, tail curved ever so slightly, neck forming that familiar arc like a crane bowing to no one. It doesn't dream in pictures. It doesn't need to. It is the dream. You wonder how long it's been like this. How many generations have stood here exactly like this, in the same posture, in the same air, resting without surrender? How many died standing? How many fell only once? How many never needed to fall at all? Historians still debate whether this behavior was survival or ritual, a necessity or a choice. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that it worked. It kept them alive for millions of years, longer than us. The wind rises slightly, brushing through the trees with a sound like the past clearing its throat. A bird calls in the distance. One of those same descendants from earlier, still awake, still standing on the branch, perhaps wondering if it too carries some distant echo of this posture. You take one last look at your sauropod. Still standing, still watching, still breathing, and then it happens. The neck lowers, not fast, not with finality, but gently, until the head hovers just above the grass. A gesture, a signal, a kind of ancient punctuation at the end of the day. And then stillness again. Not sleep, not in the way you know it, but peace. And in that moment, as the sun dips below the trees, you finally understand the full weight of it. This dinosaur never laid down because it never had to. Its rest lived in the space between footfalls. Its dreams in the swing of a tail. Its safety in standing still for so long that the earth learned to hold its breath. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is breath, not yours, theirs, and then nothing. And so as night drapes over the primeval hills and the air folds into shadow, the image of the standing sauropod lingers like a question unanswered. You followed it from storm to starlight, from fossil beds to modern birds, from whispered joints to imagined dreams, and through it all, it never once lay down. This creature, this tower of breath and biology, lived a life of movement without collapse. Its limbs were built like architecture, its lungs tuned to elevation, its dreams, if they existed, soft as breath against bark. While predators circled, it stood, While others crouched or curled, it swayed. It never needed comfort. It needed balance. And it found it in ways we barely understand. Even now, when its bones sleep under stone and its legacy soars in birds, the memory remains an animal too heavy to fall, too patient to break, too ancient to forget. You've seen the tail that kept it upright in sleep, the bones worn from standing decades at a time, the silent rules passed through generations that warned lying down is how it ends. So now, long after the herd has passed and the thunder of their steps fades into time, you find yourself changed. Every time you see a pigeon sleeping on one leg or a horse dozing in a pasture, you'll think of the one who never gave in, who stood through every night, the dinosaur that never laid down.